Well, God's amazing grace has led me through many a danger, toil, and snare. To this church, to this pulpit, after 65 years of life, 15 of them as a member of 4th Street, 2 of those embedded in my time away in San Antonio, Texas, to deliver this proclamation on this very morning. My Lord, what a morning. Let me begin our journey with a very brief reflection on the term or word Negro. It is unfortunate that this word has taken on such a pejorative meaning due to the decimation it has suffered through certain events and circumstances over time. But in fact, the derivation or the etymology of the word reveals that its source is Spanish and Portuguese in origin, meaning simply the descriptive color or adjective black, and which came to be associated with people of color other than those of the so-called brown, red, yellow, and white races. I will not belabor that issue, but simply use it as a point of departure as to why the word Negro is used in the title of this discourse. No Black History program would be complete without a discussion of music, more specifically the evolution of the genre of the Negro spiritual. The subject is vast, the questions many, the answers too few in some instances. 2 of my purposes this morning will have been served if I am able to pique your interest and thus elevate your level of pride and appreciation in and for this fascinating art form. The roots of the Negro spiritual lie in the very bedrock of a means to an end, or in this case, the means to many different ends. Spirituals are closely linked to the history of African Americans altogether. There are said to be 3 major milestones in each arena. 1865, the abolition of slavery. 1925, the era of the so-called Harlem or Black Renaissance. And 1985, which heralded the first observation of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. According to Randy Jones, in the treatise entitled The Gospel Truth About the Negro Spiritual, quote, Negro spirituals are songs created by the Africans who were captured and brought to the United States to be sold into slavery. This stolen race was deprived of their languages, families, and cultures, yet their masters could not take away their music. Over the years, these slaves and their descendants adopted Christianity, the religion of their masters. They reshaped it into a deeply personal way of dealing with the oppression of their enslavement. Their songs, which were to become known as spirituals, reflected the slaves' need to express their new faith. Close quote. To further categorize our reflective study on the Negro spiritual, we can group them into at least 6 broad arenas. Group 1, work songs. Group 2, songs pertaining to Jesus Christ and the gospel of the good news. Group 3, therapeutic songs or songs of comfort and encouragement. Group 4, quiet songs. Group 5, vehicles of code and communication. And Group 6, songs pertaining to escape via the Underground Railroad. Work songs were those that slaves were allowed to sing in their daily lives while attending to their chores and work rituals, with a subcomponent of hard labor on chain gangs, in which prisoners literally chained together so as to prevent any thought or chance of escape, sang while working on roads or on construction projects. Category 2 is inclusive of those spirituals inspired by the message of Jesus Christ and the good news gospel that one can be saved. Every time I feel the Spirit, or sit down, servant, I can't sit down, my soul's so happy that I can't sit down, are exemplary of this category. This grouping came to be the very embodiment of the word, the form and content and the basic thrust of Negro spirituals. Category Category 3 is comprised of those songs sung by slaves as a means of comforting themselves and encouraging one another that if they could just hold on, which is in fact the title of a spiritual, in the trials and tribulations they faced as slaves, things would be better in the great by and by. Death and going to heaven were much sought after goals. The sweet release from bondage and cruel oppression. I got shoes, you got shoes, oh God's children got shoes. When I get to heaven, gonna put on the shoes, gonna walk over God's heaven. Or, oh, what a beautiful city, 12 gates into the city will hold you. Or, I'm going up yonder to be with my Lord. Or, hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Are all examples in that category. My Lord, what a morning held a double entendre, as do many spirituals. Sometimes the word mourning is spelled with the letter U inserted, meaning sadness or grief at death, or in this case, the signs of the end, the so-called heavenly signs, when the sun refused to shine and when the stars fall from the sky. Used in its usual sense of a time before noon, the connotation of the word mourning changes its morphology to what an incredulous time that will be when these heavenly signs appear just before Christ's return to the earth. Category 4 contains those songs the slaves were allowed to sing, the so-called quiet songs. These were permitted as long as the words and thoughts conveyed through their renderings were not in opposition to the plantation overseers and slave masters. Hence evolved songs used for expressing personal feelings such as, nobody knows the trouble I've seen, or sometimes I feel like a motherless child, which should be very familiar to 4th Streeters, as we recall our own Edward Kingan's always beautiful rendition of it. Down by the Riverside was yet another one in this category. And of course, who can forget those spirituals that are associated with certain times on the liturgical calendar? Ride on, King Jesus, ride on, for Palm Sunday. And go tell it on the mountain, that Jesus Christ is born, are examples there. Category 5 is replete with songs that held an integral element of communication and secret codes between and amongst the slaves, along with intrigue and subterfuge. The concerted effort to escape the cruel bondage and torture that was slavery. Hence we have songs such as, steal away, steal away, steal away, which was sung as a signal by Nat Turner, a slave from Virginia, who attempted to organize a revolt against slave owners and used the song Steal Away to call other slaves to meetings. The revolt failed, after which slaves everywhere were forbidden to utter the name Nat Turner. His message and name were embroidered later into other slave songs. However, as with many other spirituals, this one held a double entendre, as the slave's desire to escape bondage through death, hence being with Jesus,